Welcome, everyone. This is Diana Kowarski. You are listening to the Soft Skills Salon podcast, the podcast where you learn how soft skills make a difference to your work, your teams, and your organization. Let's have a conversation today, and I am quite pleased to have with us Keren Castelli, and she has been a change management leader for the past 8 years. She helps people transition to Google solutions that include Google Cloud or Google Workspace, whether you're a factory worker, a desk worker, or a C-level executive. She was nominated as Top 10 ICT Lady of the Year 2022. She talks about her passion for change management in her new podcast called Change Centers. And there she gathers change practitioners from all industries to bring forth challenges, tips, and advice. Keren is also into self-development, supporting women in the IT sector, and her new hobby, sewing. I might pick your brain about sewing. I'm keen on that one. I can mend a sock like no one else, I have to tell you. But following a pattern, I don't like to be in the lines. Apparently, I'm challenged in that way. But nonetheless, Keren, pleased that you're here. Hello and welcome.
Thanks for having me, Diana. Thanks for having me. I'm so pleased to be here.
I am delighted that you're here. And just so that we can ensure that we are true to the international piece, I have the privilege of being in Toronto today. And can you let everyone know where you are, Keren?
I am near Brussels in Belgium. Yep, in the heart of Europe.
Fantastic, fantastic. So from these two different continents, let's start our conversation. And it's a great question to begin with. It is, how do you compare pre-COVID soft skills to moving beyond COVID soft skills at work? And I like to give a bit of a disclaimer, as I have not yet made a commitment to language such as post-pandemic or post-COVID, which is why this is somewhat sloppy, and all I could come up with was moving beyond COVID. So I'm glad that resonated with you. What are your thoughts about before and maybe this during time?
Yeah, such a good question. I really appreciate you asking this question. I really see a huge difference in the business world. For me, soft skill is very much about connection. Connection is so important. It's just about, being with another human being. And with COVID and remote working or hybrid working, a lot has just changed in our environment. We don't see our colleagues as often, and sometimes just not at all anymore. Many businesses have reduced their working space, just due to people, of course, not being around anymore. So there are less hangout spaces. We see that spaces are smaller, less opportunity to connect. And so the whole connection piece, that's what I'm seeing companies, my customers, struggle with. And so that hugely impacts, the way that you develop soft skills and the way that you put them into place. So the challenges that I see with my customers and in different businesses that I work with is just the fact that people sometimes forget that behind a screen, there is a human being. And we tend to just be very direct, due to productivity and productivity needs. And we need to rush from meeting to meeting, hop from one meeting to the other. So you're just very direct, I need this from you, Diana, bam, bam, bam. Can you do it? Yes or no? Okay, next, And so that's where the soft skills we need to remind people that there's still a need. There's still a human being behind the screen. There needs to be a connection. We need to check in and see how people are. And I see a huge difference. There's just such a challenge in that area.
Emphasizing connection, it really did resonate with me in your words. And from a change management perspective that I'll ask you to double down on, as someone who is at the periphery of working in around change management, I have a course, I have some consulting experience, but by no means am I a change management professional. I have great appreciation for what it is that you do. I'm curious if you make that leap then between connection, perhaps connection generally, and change or the processes of transitioning within a change management project. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, it has become quite challenging, Diana, to be honest, because change management is all about connection, right? Like aspects that are important to change management are tackling resistance, right? For example, generally when I would do change management projects in the past, I would just walk down the hall. You know, I would listen in to coffee conversations and I would listen to people complain. And that's the best way for me to grasp that information is to really be able to say, oh, yeah, are you struggling with that? Here, maybe I can help. Or, you know, or take that feedback in and loop that into the team. So, the fact that we are hybrid working or sometimes remote working, that just that connection, that presence isn't there as much. Now we try to, you know, counter it using technology. Um, it's never going to replace human connection, but we try.
I hear you. And I would say to you that it's those examples that you bring up that often I would refer to as informal or serendipitous
Yes.
interactions. Serendipitous in particular, those spontaneous points of intersection where we can connect, if only because we're both waiting for the coffee to
Yeah.
fill the cup, or
Yeah.
that we're both looking to grab the subway together, or something like that. And
Exactly.
I'm so pleased actually to hear from your perspective that those informal sources of feedback have been acknowledged within your practice previously. And at the same time, I can hear how it's almost a mournfulness because you're right, they're greatly becoming extinct for some organizations, if not quite scarce, but not necessarily being replaced. I hear you, and I agree that technology cannot bring us that serendipitous, oh, hey, you know what? That connects to kind of point.
Yeah.
Does that resonate with you?
100%, you know, and so I use a lot like the Google tools, and one of the Google features that's going to come up is the ability for an AI bot to kind of join the meet for you. I mean, okay, great for my productivity, but where does human connection go there, you know? So I love technology. I work in the sector for a reason. I really enjoy that, but yeah, but what does that do to human connection? You know, I have a really good example of a few years back. I was giving a training, and so the training ends, and this sweet lady, she was just sat there with her computer, and I can see that she wasn't moving. You know, she was just sat behind her computer, and so I closed up my computer, my laptop, and everything. I wrapped up, and I went to see her. Like, are you okay? And I said, are you okay? And then she had like teary eyes, you know.
Oh,
She said to me, oh, I'm so overwhelmed by this training and this content. I'm never going to grasp it. And then she had to cry. And I just sat next to her and I was like, okay, let's just take some time. Let's go through, you know, the topics that were hard for you. And that's what I'm going to miss today. I give online trainings. I'm going to miss that sweet lady that's crying behind her screen, you know? It's a bit of an extreme example, but it did happen to me.
the cynic in me thought perhaps you were going to conclude that you missed making people cry, but that's not
That's
the
not
lesson
it. You
learned here.
know?
The connection and the opportunity to have that individuated experience. You're absolutely right. And someone who, as someone who teaches and often struggles, and I continue and I always will struggle with the online piece versus the in-person piece. There's great benefits and hindrances to both. I can
Yeah.
on either side of that line. However, those again serendipitous or perhaps outlier conversations, and it isn't always a struggle, although I do appreciate that you could have been of great service, and I'm sure you were of great service to that one learner who needed some more of your time and your attention. But it can also be opportunity for someone to respond with a, hey, that reminds me about blah blah blah, which may not have been in your design or may not have been
100%.
within your purview, or could bring you somewhere that we're not going to get if we don't have access to each other, and that, sometimes even measured in nanosecond time of processing, where someone can say, I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah,
Right? Or
exactly.
I'm curious though, the AI bots that is out there, and our opportunities suddenly to have proxy in some of our meetings and in some of our work. I've been a proponent for so long for so many of the leaders that I have coached over the last couple of decades to groom some of and to pre-populate their own legacy by having a staff member attend a meeting on their behalf and
Mm,
report in. And some have met that suggestion for development with incredible resistance because they feel out of the loop, or that there's a trust, perhaps tension that hasn't been identified, or it isn't ego boosting. So I can only assume, based on that maybe we won't be so quick to put the bot in, but I don't have a fully functional crystal ball. I'm trying.
I don't know. I think it's going to be really weird. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of the other person, right? You're in a call, maybe alone or with a robot. I don't even know how that's going to look like, to be honest. How can you prepare your questions up front and ask the robot to, I don't know. I don't know. I just find that a little bit strange, but
It's
maybe it's just me. I'm sometimes
no, I'm
watching.
sure
I
many
don't
people
know.
find it strange. And I suppose my only hesitance to try and pursue that thinking any further is that it seems at one step so close to the horizon of what's next, and at my next thought, it seems so far fetched. So there's been so much change just this calendar year with
Mm,
AI and that whole generative world. And yet we're here because of the whole non-AI piece. I've talked about HI recently in terms of human intelligence, but I don't know how much human intelligence there is out there. I don't. That's another conversation.
indeed.
But it does have a lovely segue for us in terms of our conversation, because one of the questions that is indeed and quite intentionally offered in our buffet approach of our questionnaire is one that can be contentious, and I know is very interesting to many of our listeners. And it sounds like this: do you use the term soft skills, and why or why not, and when or when not? And before I hand it over to you, Karen, one of the one of the true incentives for this question is that, as someone who works internationally, there's a great regionalism to the use of the term soft skills that has made itself known. And having spent a fair amount of time this past year working in Asia, there's a real love for the term. And then
Okay.
in North America, there's a mixed approach.
Mm,
Within parts of Europe, I would say some of my colleagues there's also this mixed approach to it. And then, I can't speak to every region, but it's certainly been around long enough that it's worth debating. So I'm interested.
mm. That is so cool. I did not know that difference in perspective. So do I use the term? Yes, I do use the term because then people know what I'm talking about when I talk about soft skill. Do I like the term, Diana? No, because soft is weak, is perceived as weak, right? And so whenever I do talk about soft skill, and in change management, we need to have a huge deal of soft skill. I mean, just already with my example, empathy, listening skills, right? Negotiation, conflict resolution, all that. Very often I have to make sure that people don't mistake soft with fluffy, or just weak or unquantifiable, or sometimes even unimportant.
I hear
So
you.
that I don't like the word soft skill. I really wish we could come up with another term, honestly. Emotional EQ. How do you say that again? Emotional.
Or the quotient. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think that's a better word, to be honest.
Potentially, I can tell you that I'm not wed to the term soft skills, and that I very intentionally invite debate around its use. And while we are on the Soft Skills Salon podcast, I will say to you that the current thinking I have, and I've had my thinking evolve, and I look forward to it evolving further as time passes, is that I'm disinterested in a perpetuation of what I often hear as a binary approach of
Mm,
soft somehow being less than versus hard being more than.
100%.
And while we often will say that it's the soft skills that will propel you, and those examples that you brought up, right, are absolutely true to success in and around change, but I would suggest to you in and around one's career in general, whether it's listening or empathy or confidence or assertiveness or team building or leadership and
Yeah.
conflict and so on. So
Mm,
I'm disinterested in using language that perpetuates soft as less than,
yeah.
because soft is often what we need much more so than hard. And the origin of soft skills is often debated. It's one that, as a term, is often assigned to the US military as having put it forward. I'm not sure if
Okay.
you're aware of that. And
No, I didn't.
so I can't give you the approximate date. I want to say the 1950s, but I could be wrong in that. However, the US military is often thought of as having put together this term because working with something that is physically hard, like a machine, versus anything that is soft to the touch, needed to
Mm,
be distinguished. So
okay.
hard, soft. So I don't know. Also, I think with a nod towards a feminist perspective or an inclusivity perspective, that soft is appreciated enough. And there are many leaders who are regarded as very skilled in their soft areas
Mm,
that we don't celebrate. So
yeah.
I don't have the language solution. I wish I did, Karen. But I can tell you that I'm not willing to leave it alone because it isn't enough yet for me to reconcile that.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like one thing that you said that I found super important is to celebrate soft skill. That
Right.
is such a key element because that's not done today. Whenever you go, you start describing a successful leader,
Mhm.
it's very rare that you will start saying, oh yeah, that person is very empathetic or that person will listen and will resonate with you. Generally, those are not the qualities that are put forward, right?
Right. And it's at the same time what it is that we look for, right?
Mm,
So I find it amazing that there are leaders like Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand,
yeah.
who was very clear. I am soft. I am
Yes.
empathetic. I am caring. I am, and very clear on using that language. And I would say to you that during her tenure, that it created her hard skills to be that much more of the spotlight, because
Mm,
used the language that said, yes, I am this, and this. Without getting too political, my premier in Canada has a spotty international reputation. Complicated, maybe is a better word. However, there have been many an example, regardless of where you might fall politically, and this is not an endorsement, about him as a means by which to again look at that area of skill set being effective for a longer approach to goal setting versus more of a short-term perspective. But
Right.
there's a lot of worlds of possibilities in terms of language and how it is that we get to figure this out. You
Yeah.
you make such a great point in looking at how soft skills are, often coming by many different names. And in particular, you mentioned empathy, and I want to piggyback on that, if I may,
Sure.
because one of those soft skills that I am asked and have been for many years to incorporate in some training or to bring some of an emphasis to is how to learn empathy. And so I haven't yet concluded upon a way, although there's a few schools of thought. However, going back to your expertise around change and change management, how do you promote empathy in those processes?
Yeah, we promote empathy with taking time, I think, to listen to people, listen to their complaints. So we actually create room for resistance. I know resistance is a bit of a strong word, but we create room to let people express themselves. And we listen. We don't always have to give people an answer. And I think that's already a good way to kind of make sure that the entire team is practicing empathy, because empathy, you need to kind of listen, right, to the other person. And the second thing is kind of resonate with them, understand where they are, and kind of act upon it. So if someone's really angry, we teach the team to kind of let them, be angry, let them show their emotions. It's fine. People will calm down after a time, and then we can, sit together and look at what the real problem is about. So I think listening, resonating, giving people space, welcoming emotions. I've been yelled at, I don't know how many times in my change initiatives. It's just part of the job. So you kind of just, not in an abusive way, but you let people express their emotions, and then you help them. Like empathy is a lot about help, actually. You want to help somehow.
For sure. I appreciate that. I'm very familiar, and I appreciate also your sensitivity around the use of the word resistance. However, I would say to you, as a underskilled change management leader myself, that I've been an advocate for incorporating, acknowledging, and expecting as mundane and par for the course resistance within change rather than it being
100%. Yeah.
yes, you okay, good. I was hoping I was in alignment with you. So I love the fact that you went from resistance then to resonating. And maybe there's certainly alliteration, but maybe in addition to that alliteration, there's a space between the resistance and the resonating. And I would say to you that we need to resist in some way, and that comes in a variety of ways. I'm sure you've seen a whole spectrum in your career, but that in order to resonate, we need the resistance, if only because I'm going to put in more R's here. I'm hearing this as the difference between a reaction and a response.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And what also helps to add on to that, Diana, is that generally people that work with my projects, they've been through the same change. So this in my case here, I'm helping people transition from Microsoft to Google. They've had to go through the pain themselves. And so I think that really helps in, with the frustration that you get, and being in an uncomfortable situation, not knowing where to click and all that, helps you to help others. And so being able to go through life experiences helps you to empathize with a similar life situation. I'm talking about here about business, but in life as well, right? You can have empathy, but you'll have a double portion of empathy if you've been through the same situation the other person has.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that example of change that you bring up, I'm convinced that one of the unintentional lessons learned or byproducts of COVID has been globally a shift in some thinking about change management being at a micro and personal level, at least occasionally, if not quite frequently, in addition to being at this macro. Because oftentimes people think of change management as needing to be at the mission or the resources or at that
Yeah.
industry wide level. And COVID said, you know, that commute that you've had and not thought about for the last X number of years, pained about, you know, this and that. Well, you're not going to do that anymore. And you're going to
Yeah.
work out of your kitchen on the kitchen table. Oh, that is perhaps a silly example to compare to that same transition phase within a change of technology being anything but intuitive and having to move to a new one. Is that in alignment with your thinking?
100%. Yes. Yes. Honestly, when I think back with COVID and everything that people had to cope with, I mean, we all had to cope with. I think we realize it more now than when we were actually in the situation. We were all in survival mode. We had to kind of survive. But when I look back, wow, we went through just a lot of change, the changing the way that you connect with people, the way that you do meetings, the way that you resolve conflict. I mean, conflict resolution is a whole other topic, but just the way that you work with your team, the way that you deal with technology, having to explain a new technology remotely, that was such a challenge at first. Yeah, we went through a lot of change, a lot of change.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So when it comes to all of those changes, and you've mentioned empathy, but you've also mentioned conflict. So let me spin towards that
Yeah.
conflict. What's your favorite way? What's your favorite way of either addressing or certainly labeling, if not potentially solving interpersonal conflict on a team?
It's a good, very good topic. Well, the first thing that I like to do is have a conversation. That's one of the key elements is really to stir a two-way conversation, you know? There's a saying that there is no such thing as truth. Everyone has their own truth. I really like that. So I think it's just first starting with, I generally start with 3 yeses. So let's say I have a conflict with someone, I'll start with agreeing on 3 things with that person. So we've had this conflict. I know we both have good intentions, right? We both try to do our best in our jobs. We both, whatever, a 3rd yes. So 3 yeses that kind of brings positivity to the call and sets sets the scene that we're both on common ground. We're both seeing eye to eye. So I think that kind of just opens up the conversation. And then stick to facts, try to say, okay, this is what I see that happens. And then ask the person, like, what do you think about this? This is how I felt. What do you think about it? And then just open up the dialogue, really. I think communication is really conversations rather than communication, but conversations are really important.
So let me ask you a couple of questions. In this conversation that you are crafting, do you use the word conflict? Would you label it as such? How would you either invite or perhaps frame such a conversation?
That's good. I would say, look, there's something that I would like to talk to you about. Depending on who my audience, depending if it's a customer, if it's a colleague, if it's a manager, I would say maybe up front, like there's something bothering me. There's something I really need to talk to you about. Depending on my intimacy, I think with the other person. So I try to avoid the word conflict because it just brings negativity. And people come in the call with like a closed heart or like a closed, stressed out already, you know?
Yeah. And then those three yeses, it's an interesting technique. And is it one that you have found is effective in bringing people to the same side?
Yeah, that's one my mentor she taught me. I find it really does help. It does help because it puts us both on the same level, saying, okay, we have this disagreement. Maybe we have different points of views, but look, we have this and this and this in common,
I agree. And I have not heard of it spoken of as the three yeses. I'm delighted to have that as a way of synthesizing this. For my work, it's often referred to from an organizational behavior perspective as
Mm.
triangulating. So a conversation has three parties. There's you, there's me, and then the conversation or the topic, if you will. And sometimes it might be a contentious one or it might be a really clear one. However, if we can be on the same side of it, then perhaps the means by which to get to that same sidedness is through three yeses.
Oh, that's nice.
Right?
I understand where it comes from now.
I think I understand where the yeses come from. And it's funny, there's often a hesitance when we are looking at having an improved conversation or to ensure that we are meeting a purpose in how we're communicating. There can be a hesitance of thinking through an approach or of having even a cursory plan, because many of us feel that there's a connotation towards it being anything but spontaneous or
Yeah.
even disingenuous in some way.
Mm.
And I've learned that nothing could be further from the truth, and that in fact people greatly appreciate if you are thoughtful and if you even say, I've thought about this and I have three questions, and and it's not that it isn't spontaneous and involved, but that it's actually bigger than just that moment. And coming with three yeses or coming with this idea, it's how is it that we, which is a very powerful two-letter little pronoun, how can we be on the same side? And going back to your expertise, how can we be on the same side of exchange?
Yeah.
And often, again, with the limited work that I do around change, the people involved, to my experience, can very, very rarely say to a change, no, thank you. Perhaps try us again next year. We're good.
Yeah.
Right? There's
Yeah.
very few changes that we can actually have discretion over, whether it's a change in leadership, a change in technology, a change in process, etc. Very few of us can just say, I'm good. Maybe not.
Yeah.
So in that sense, at a very macro level, we are already on the same side, right? We are going to have this change happen to us. So what are we going to do next?
Exactly. That's the empathy part that kind of comes back, right? That empathy where you're just like, I understand what you're going through. And if I were in your shoes, I would be feeling that way as well. It just makes people feel seen and heard, and it feeds into that need of significance. Like you're your own person, and I understand your feelings are valid. Your feelings are okay. How can we move forward from that, or how can we solve then this miscommunication or this conflict or whatever it is?
I've written down this lovely turn of phrase you've used, the need of significance. We have it. We have a need of significance, a need for significance. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I'm convinced that we all behave better, that we self-censor, that we are more thoughtful, that we're intentional or deliberate, and dare I say empathetic, if I may, when we have that need of our own significance in check, and when we offer someone else that need of significance that there validates that interaction. That makes sense on so many levels for me. And I know when I'm in my own world struggling to be either understood or to understand someone else, that in hindsight, I will have some thoughts in my own response of how it is that we can figure out what is going on and how it is that we can look at the overall significance that we're engaged in. So it can be really important. With that
Exactly.
in mind, the need of significance here that I like to say is that your contributions to the Soft Skills Salon have been exceptional, and I truly do appreciate your time. And
I'm
we're
so
going to
pleased.
have a chance now to hopefully get to know each other outside of
Oh,
this.
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you very, very much for your insights, Keren.
Thanks, Diana, for having me. And I really hope whoever's listening, you feel inspired and yeah, it helps you in any way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for listening to another dynamic and informative episode of the Soft Skills Salon with your host, Diana Kowarski. Please consider subscribing to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we also encourage you to visit our website and social media links, which you can find in the show's notes. We look forward to bringing you another episode. And remember, conversation is the currency of communication. Bye for now.